Growth Show, where we hold candid conversations with fascinating individuals from all walks of life. We interview each guest to learn about their passions and their successes, all of their failures, all of those lessons learned, and how they have applied personal growth to their lives. At the end of every conversation, we gather all the key takeaways that we can all implement to better ourselves and everybody who lives around us. As always, let us know how we can help you, and please enjoy the show. Today, like usual, I'm joined by my co-host and good buddy, Greg. Greg, how's it going tonight?
Man, Sammy, it's going good, and I'm super excited that we are joined today by Victor Calabrese, who is the president and COO of Deskside, which is a technology success partner. He's a varied background with a multitude of interests that include nutrition, fitness, personal growth, and pretty much anything that helps to improve oneself. He is now in the process of accumulating all that he's learned into a book that he is calling Accessing Your True Potential, which we're going to get into a little bit later in this show. Vic, welcome to the Pursuit of Growth, man. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolutely, man. We're going to jump right into this. So one of the first things that people think about in terms of personal development, personal growth, organization are creating, what are my to-do lists, my goals, the things that I'm going to accomplish. We all have to-do lists. What we want to ask you, Vic, is what if you had a to-be list? What might we find on your list?
So that's actually interesting. I do have a to-be list, and there's only two things on it: be happy and be free. So be happy is really important to me because it's one of those things that if you get your mindset right in the beginning of the day, it will transfer into the rest of the day. So being happy, getting up with positive thoughts is really important. Being free is another big one, right? I'm talking about free from your emotions, free from decisions, free financially. And all these things are really important to making you, and we'll talk about it later, a part of accessing your true potential. So those are the two things that are my to-be list: is be free and be happy.
So you mentioned right off the bat when you started talking about be happy, you immediately talked about first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through, what does your morning routine look like, and maybe what are some kind of tactical things that you do to kind of get your mindset in the right place to be happy, to really set that foundation for the rest of the day?
So, like everybody else, my morning routine ebbs and flows. Like at some points in my life, I've had a lot of stuff. I am a big proponent of a book I read, The Miracle Morning, which he actually portrays specific things that one does in the morning to get, journaling, meditation, exercise. So there's a bunch of things that he actually goes in there. And he makes a really good point about making sure you make the time, right? So if you naturally get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's okay to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to put these things in your life because they do make a big difference. Now, with that said, I'm a human being, so we have ebbs and flows. Right now, exercise is something that's falling off my to-do, which is terrible for me to say because I'm big into fitness and nutrition, but exercise is taking a back seat. Meditation is taking a front seat. That's one of the things that I've actually added both on my night routine and my morning routine to make sure that I get centered, quiet the mind, make sure that all the negative stuff is nowhere near to be found. I have this saying that I like to step on ants, automatic negative thoughts. So you step on these automatic negative thoughts to get your day started. And when you start starting your day, you end your day in a positive, right? So you go to sleep, everything kind of calms down. You wake up and you make sure you start your day in a positive, you put yourself in a happy place, and your days are really, really different. So my morning routine is really about getting up. I do that morning meditation. It's quick. It's in the bed. Before I get up, and then I get up and I start taking care of my family. I set the breakfast up for the kids, making sure that they get off on the right foot, and then shower, get them off to school, and I'm off to work.
There's some similarities with my evening routine and my morning routine that kind of coincide with what you just said. So when I go to bed at night, I focus my prayers on my gratitudes. So I get myself and my attitude kind of in that happy, that joyful, that state of just focusing on all the different blessings, big and small, that I have in my life. What I've found over the course of my adulthood is when my anxiety is the highest is when I wake up. And for whatever reason, my mind is quick to start jumping to what are all the things that I can fear? What are all the things that can potentially go wrong and cause me harm today? And I've learned that equipped with the right attitude, life is limitless, right? And so I have this thing about kill negative thoughts. and replace weak thoughts with strong thoughts. So I like how you said step on ants, but when I have those negative thoughts, I literally shift them or kill them and turn them into, if I'm worried about this, it's either gone, I'm not going to focus on it, or I'm going to spin the positive to it. I get to attack this, which is going to make me better and make my day awesome, right? And so I go through that process, and then I kind of move on with the rest of my day.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because what you're actually doing is in its simplistic form is getting into now, right? Because if your brain is going into the future, that's anxiety. Anytime your brain is in the future, it's anxiety. If you start thinking about the past and the things that have happened, that's depression.
Depression,
right?
Yeah.
So that's the two extremes. And your brain naturally does that, right? It starts thinking about the future, starts thinking about the past. What you want to do is just get back into now. Right now, everything's perfect, right? You just woke up, you just great rest, you had a great night, you're ready to tackle a day. You start getting excited. I do this with my kids in the car. It's something that I started doing recently, but I get them pumped up. Like I put a little bit of music on. I'm like, you guys are gonna have a great day today. I'm trying to teach them that it's okay to put some positive energy into oneself, so that when you tackle school, when you start going there, they're actually getting out of the car. They're excited to start their day.
Yeah. Well, one tip that I want to share, and that I'd love to hear Sammy's feedback on this. I actually listened to a podcast maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and the interviewee said that he has a process that when he, especially in the morning when he wakes up and there's things that are concerning him, he asks himself this question: is this useful? And if it's useful, then he says, I'm going to write it down and I'll make a plan to address it. If it's not useful, I eliminate it, I kill it, and I ignore it, and I stay centered in the present. And so that's a question that I've started asking myself when I have some type of anxiety: is this useful? If it's not, it's gone.
Yep.
Yeah, I find that I love the fact that you're focusing a lot more on meditation. It's something that I used to do in place of a lot of my workouts if I did not work out. So I had a rule that if I did not work out, and I'm a first thing in the morning kind of guy, I wake up 5:15 and it takes me 3 minutes to get dressed and I walk upstairs, and I'm either hitting the Peloton or I'm going out for a run or I'm, lifting some weights or whatever it is. But I had a rule that if I did not do any type of physical activity, I needed to meditate. And that was something I did for probably a good, almost a year and a half. Now just focusing mostly on the physical side of stuff, but I need to put meditation back in. So I'm interested as to hearing, like, what is your particular means of meditation? Do you have any specific mantras? Is it breathing exercises? Is there a specific tactic that you have that you like best?
So there's different types of meditation. There's a lot of different types of meditation, right? And one of the things that I will tell you that I've read, that there's studies where working out and meditation, where working out is actually a form of meditation,
A flow
right?
state,
You actually
right?
get into that alpha state, and you start getting into that happy place, that the mind quieted down when you're focusing on exercising your body. So that is a form of meditation. I have two different ones. In the morning, it's really about visualizations of the things that I want in the future, and trying to make sure that I have some happy thoughts around it, not thoughts of lack, because that's another thing that people kind of get swayed into. They start thinking, I wish I had this stuff. That's not the way. You have to think about things, and especially when you're doing visualization, as if you already have those things, right? So that's a form of meditation, and that's a really quick. I've gotten to the point where I can get into that zone in about 5 minutes, and I stay in there for about 5 minutes, and then I just kind of cool off for about 5 minutes. So it's a 15-minute thing. At night, it's a little different. So at night, it's more about affirmations. And the way I've been doing it lately is I have my Bose headset, and I put on Insight Timer. And Insight Timer's got a bunch of different things that are all around affirmations and all around just putting your body. There's like there's a couple of them, those like 432 megahertz things where it's the music by binaural beats sort of things, right? And I've tried that. I like that a little bit, but the affirmations really get to me, right? Because you just sit there and you lay down. It's really relaxing. It puts you, gets you ready to go to sleep because your eyes are not working, right? You're not having an active conversation. You're just sitting there listening. And it's all positive stuff that they just start talking to you. And at a certain point, I've actually fallen asleep with that meditation, and then woken up is like, oh man, I still have these on, and I have to take them off. So those are the two forms that I really like. Now there is a third one that I use during the day when I need it, right? So there's certain times, everybody's got them. There's some stressful times in the day, and sometimes you really get beat up. And in those moments, I try to think of nothing, which is easier said than done, right? So you sit in your chair. I try to find like a little noise, whether it's the vent or something I can focus on. And that I do that for about 5 minutes, but the whole point is to get rid of all those thoughts. Because if you quiet down the mind for a second, the most important things when you reactivate and you're ready to re-engage, they actually pop to the surface and you're like, okay, this is what I have to do next. And you just go.
I love that. One of my routines that, and I've used the binaural beats a lot in the past. I really like that. The one of the things that I do, it's just a little quick tip, is that when I hit the bed, I'm pretty much ready for bed. I don't get like relaxed. I don't like wind down. I just have a naturally on off switch. But one of the things that I've done in the past is I flip my pillow over to the cool side, lay my head down, and then I just smile. I make myself smile. And then I just think about something good that happened today. And usually I can be in bed and asleep by, 3 minutes. But I feel like, hey, if in my day with a smile, no matter what happened, that's usually a good kind of positive affirmation for me right before I hit the dream state.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that is I can't remember what book I read. It's one of the psychology books that I read, but there was a thing in there that smiling for a purpose and just smiling on purpose, the brain actually can't distinguish the two. So you could actually force yourself to get into a positive mood just by forcing yourself to smile, because your brain doesn't know the difference, whether you're smiling because of something or because you're forcing yourself to smile and then causing yourself to be happy.
I like it. I think that's what I naturally just picked up on, because it's true. Like I just lay there, smile. It's like, okay, now
Yeah.
I'm actually in a good spot. I mean, you're comfortable, right? You're ready for bed. You're there. So that's a little. I think all of these tips that we've all shared here, from a morning routine to evening routine, are really going to benefit people. So thanks for sharing all those.
Yeah, it's so critical too, because the quality of your life is directly correlated to the quality of your mind, right? And I think we live in a society and a culture where that's under fire right now. That's the big war we have right now, is mental health. And so I think the more people can have these discussions and kind of share, hey, these are the things that I'm doing that are really benefiting me in terms of the pressures and the different challenges that we're facing in this modern society, the better we're all going to be. And so I know, Vic, like I'm excited to talk a little bit later in the show more about your book, because I think it's going to probably bring up a lot more of these type of things. And also, I think that's going to help, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think that's really going to go into the point about your second to be, which is be free.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited
Absolutely.
to talk about that. But
Yeah.
before we get there, Sammy and I want to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial spirit, because that's something that he and I, having known you for quite some time now, have been really impressed and admired you for. So to start out with, this is just kind of a fun question. What was your first job?
Oh, wow. So my first job, I was a kid. I shouldn't have been working. I was 12 or 13 years old, something to that effect. And I was getting paid under the table at a friend's pizzeria. So, I told my parents, it was a summer, and I remember like it's yesterday, because my parents actually said yes. I got really, really happy. I was bored. I was like, and I had everything, man. I grew up my father really took care of us. We had a pool, but I was bored. Like I'm one of those people that just needs to be doing something, right? So I told my dad, I'm like, I can't spend my days soaking in the pool and just playing I need to be doing something. So he said, okay. He took me, we went to a pizzeria, and he says to the owner, he's like, my son would like to work. Cash, I was making like $200 a week or something like that. Not that I saw any of it, because my mother would take it from me and put it in my savings account. But yeah, that's that was my first job, and I remember like it was yesterday.
So what did you actually do in this pizzeria? Were you making pizzas? Were you delivering, doing dishes?
So I was bussing tables.
Were you laundering money? What was going on here?
So, no laundering money. They came on later in life now. So I was doing the bussing tables. The one thing that I remember doing all the time is, believe it or not, if you go to a pizzeria, the mozzarella comes in these big plastic bags, right? But because they're shipped, they're almost like a brick, and they're unusable. It's shredded mozzarella. So I literally spent my time in the back massaging the mozzarella and spreading it all apart so that when they were ready to use it, it was ready to just be used on the thing. I remember that fondly. Bussing the tables was the other one. Sweeping the floors. I was just taking care of the restaurant, opening and closing, things like that.
I think we all have those kind of first jobs that we can vividly remember. I was kind of grew up kind of in the country-ish, like outside in a small town anyway, but I had one random summer where I was baling hay. Like just it was great workout. Like it was great. One thing I learned is never bale hay in short sleeve shirts. Uh, no matter if it's August or whatever it was, because you will get torn up by that hay. But the impressions that those first jobs leave on us, I think they're so valuable too, right? Teaches you hard work. You get paid a little bit of money, even though you don't see it, because my mom took all my money too and stashed it away for me as well. But I think it's key, especially as a person with two young kids, always wanting to get them like early, like committed to something that has goals, that they see their rewards and their hard work pays off. I think that's a really key life lesson that hopefully a lot of people are able to instill early in life.
Yeah, I mean, God bless my father, because honestly, he really did a great job with all of us. I mean, I had, from that point on, I had jobs every single summer, and my father was in construction, so every summer I ended up, when I got a little older, I think around 16 years old, I started working on a construction site. And one year I was a carpenter. One year I got to drive the machines. I actually got to drive the big roller to compact the soil. One
Nice.
year I was a mason, and another year I was doing concrete. So I got to learn all these things. I'm terrible at it now. Like I can't put a house together, but I got to do all these great jobs.
My first job outside of mowing someone's yard like a neighbor that I actually got paid for was working on a ranch. And my job was to carry throughout the entire summer this huge, think of the Ghostbusters backpacks, like the proton packs, except for I carried this huge container of a mixture of diesel fuel and the poison remedy. And so I would go through this ranch and just spray mesquite trees because they had to clear all the mesquite trees off this land. And so it literally took us 3 months out of the summer to clear all this land, do this. I understand now there's like a class action lawsuit against Remedy because it's like caused cancer in so many people. So I probably should look into it to see if I have like a little money coming my way. But it was a terrible job. But looking back, we had so many great memories doing it. But it was kind of my first exposure of working for somebody else. So Vic, I'm curious for you, going from working for your dad, where did the entrepreneurial spirit that you have now, how did that develop? Where did that start? And how'd you dip your toes into that?
So I had, ever since my first job, I've always wanted to own something. My dad had owned all his businesses. He actually started working for somebody else when we migrated to this country, because in Italy, he owned his own company. We migrated over. He ended up being a baker for a while. And that's one of the few jobs that I remember my father actually being an employee. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial house. My mom was an entrepreneur, right? She had a fashion company. She had a travel agency. So we had all these different businesses. And I've always wanted to own it. But unfortunately, I have this feeling, or at least what I grew up with, that this society that we live in actually takes that away from people. It almost pushes them into go get a job, 9 to 5, and just that's the right thing to do, and make sure you have a 401k, and it takes that away from, and it took it away from me. Like I wanted to be a doctor because at one point it was like I could be an entrepreneur, but at the same time I'm a doctor, right? It's almost like having a job. It's the best of both worlds. But I didn't go that route. So then I said, you know what? I need more stability in my life. I started tricking myself into that idea that a job is stability and that owning your own job is risky, which in reality, when I look at it backwards, they're both risky. Working for somebody else or working for yourself has the same exact risk. I don't care what anybody says. So I did have my first company was a construction company that I started with a friend of my father's that only lasted like 6-8 months. And that company I ended up taking as a consulting company that I still have today. That's why I use that company as my consulting arm as one of the other companies. But then I started doing the job thing, right? I was really good with the job thing. I was really good with technology. I was getting really high positions. You know, I've been CIO of a big construction company. I've been COO of technology companies. So I was doing okay on the job front, or at least I thought I was doing okay, right? Because once you become your own boss, you start seeing the difference between, you know, what a wage is and what a dividend is, right? Or what an owner makes. So um, the, then I struggled, because then what ends up happening is you start working at a job, you become a slave to the job. You start having family, you start having houses. It gets harder and harder and harder to start your own thing. But it was burning. It was burning inside. I could feel it. I would talk to my wife about it. It's like, I don't know what I have to do. And then the last job I had was Pinnacle, and that job just beat the crap out of me. That was the job that I had to. It was a call center. Long story short, I had to lay off about 75% of the call center, which was about 200 employees that we had to end up laying off. And I had to do that. And the last person that I fired was myself. It beat the crap out of me. And that day, I decided I am no longer working for somebody else. I sold my house. I went 2 years struggling bad. I mean, supporting my family on the little bit of money we had in savings and whatever, the sell of the house, going back into a rental. It took me about 2 years. I ended up starting 4 businesses, but starting a business takes time.
Yeah.
And in those 4 years, the business has started. I was still struggling. And now we find ourselves here. It's been about 5 years now. I have all 4 businesses and they're all running. And now I'm kind of crazy trying to go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, just to keep them all going, because they're at that point, right? They're in a company's growth called Whitewater. If you've ever read the book, Predictable Success, you'll know what I'm saying. There's stages to companies' growth. All these companies are in Whitewater, which means there's money coming in. We have clients, everything's great, but the policies, the procedures, the people are not in place. So you have this struggle of just like, you know, you're putting out one fire, you're putting in this procedure to fix this problem. So that's where I find myself today. But I will tell you, I have never been happier. Never. And I wake up every day with a smile, and I don't sit in the parking lot going, oh God, this will be over in 8 hours. I'm just super happy. I mean, it's 7 o'clock now, and I'm okay. You know, I work Saturdays, I work Sundays. I have time with my kids when I want to have time with my kids. I have the freedom, which is a big part of the 2B that we were talking about, just because I've structured my life that way.
As a business owner, and especially in the times now, you know, we hear a lot about the people that, you know, some of the struggles and some of the challenges that people are facing. I wanted to unpack those a little bit with you as someone that's running 4 businesses that you mentioned are in that kind of whitewater location and their growth. What are some of the biggest challenges you see facing right now? We've heard it from service industry people. We've seen restaurants go, you know, have to close their doors. Is it a people thing still? Is that what you're lacking, or unpack that a little bit for us?
So each of the companies has its own challenges, because they're different. Like my wife's company, Pretty Teepees, it's a people problem 100%, because you're talking about hourly employees. Yeah. And even if you're paying that $16, $17 an hour magic number, it's still hard to find people and good people that are dedicated to the company. So absolutely people problem I see. When you start talking about my consulting company, it's really a sales problem, because I don't have enough time to devote to marketing and doing all the other stuff because of all the time that the other companies are taking. Deskside is blowing up. It's selling. Everything's going great. That company is more about financing, right? How do we get the money to actually start growing? Because that company needs people, but those are higher level engineers. They're a little easier to find, I think. They're not as difficult as your hour employees. So you just got to invest in the company. Which we've been doing. We've been doing a good job. So it all depends on what type of company we're talking about. So they're all different problems, but people's definitely the number one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to go down that path is because we're seeing in different industries. You know, outside of the pursuit of growth, you know, I work in software development as well, and one of the big things that we see is like the people problem. But I wanted to highlight those because it seems to be a challenge will be a challenge no matter where you are. And that's why I want people to understand too, that they're going to run up against something that's going to be unique in their business, but it's also going to be something that other people have experienced as well and that have overcome. So it kind of rolls into the next question I was going to ask, is about your peers and who you learn from. Like, would love to see, like, for you to share with the audience, where do you go for advice? Where do you go? Who do you see as a peer? Like, what's been impactful in your life in that realm?
So there's a couple of avenues, and honestly, I really think you need three different peers in your life. You need a more family kind of person that kind of guides you in one way. You need someone to guide you spiritually, and then you need someone to guide you in the business front. Luckily, I've been lucky enough to have all three of those in my father since from the very beginning. I wish I would have found Vistage earlier, but my dad has been that person for me all the time for many, many, many years. So anytime I have something, whether it is a personal or a spiritual or a business thing, I just bounce things off of him. The other one I have is, Ken Stibler has been my coach since I think it's been like 8 years or 6 years now. So I belong to Vistage. It's a peer group kind of situation where I started at the key group level, where it's key individuals within organizations that get together once a month. I am now in a CEO group where it's CEOs, presidents of those companies getting together, just dealing with different problems, right? One's on the managerial side, one's on the business owner side, but it's still having those peers from varied industries helping you out with those business problems. My group is awesome because they actually help me with personal problems too. You come up and you just say, oh, I'm having a rough day because X, Y, and Z. And they're there to support you, as much or as little as you need. And Ken's always been there for me, right? So I just had lunch with Ken the other day, and we start talking a little bit of business. He's giving me a little bit of advice on my boys and what they need for their future, what he's done. Like Ken says, he's got shingles on the roof, right? So he can give me a lot of different pieces of information that I may not know or I'm just overlooking. So that's where I get my mentorship. Other than one of my other principles is not a person, it's just books. I read a lot.
One of the things that Sammy and I talk about in the book that we wrote is it is such a amazing habit, process, whatever you want to call it, to actually go out and develop your own personal board of directors. And so I think it looks a little bit different for different people. So for me, I've got someone that I can turn to for health and nutrition. I've got somebody that I can turn to for like IT stuff. I've got somebody that I can go to for kind of family things. I've got people that I can go to for all these different buckets in my life that I've deemed to be really, really important. And when you go to someone and ask them, hey, will you serve with this role with me? Like, will you be kind of my board of director? Like, it's such a cool compliment. Like, every person that I've ever asked to do that just gets the biggest thrill out of it. And typically, I'll talk to them once a month, sometimes once every 3 months, and, just ping them for different things. Hey, I need some help with this, or what are your thoughts on that? But just knowing that I've got this group of people around me is just such a huge, like, powerful incentive for me. It's incredible. So I love how you narrowed it down to family, spiritual, and business. That's super cool.
And the other thing I would like to add to that, because I know we're always looking for help, but the best way I've learned these days, as I've achieved a certain level of success, is helping others. I've actually been learning a lot just having people. It's like, well, you give me a problem, it's probably something I've tackled in the past, and I start giving you my opinion about it. But helping others has been another great path for me to learn myself.
Yeah, Sammy and I have talked about this on a previous episode of this show. It's amazing when you start actually looking to coach and serve and help others. That's one of the biggest areas of personal growth where you're just going to see things exponentially increase in your own life. And when you take the focus off yourself, this goes back to that first conversation that we had about mindset and anxiety. When you start putting the needs of others over the needs of yourself, it's amazing how your mind shifts and how just your priorities start changing. Now, of course, you've got to take care of yourself. It's just like the analogy when you're on the plane and it starts going down and the oxygen pops down. You got to put yours on first to be able to then help somebody else. But your focus is, how can I use my growth to serve others? And it's just a whole radically different mindset. And honestly, it's kind of an upside down version of really what our culture tells us we should be doing. Because our culture is telling us it's all about Sammy, or it's all about Vic, or it's all about Greg. When you shift that to no, actually it's about other people, man, that's when things, I believe, take off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my wife's the perfect example. My wife has never owned a business ever in her life. She went from, being an employee, and just 2 years ago, she decided to open a business. She's been my greatest student, and seeing her succeed with the lessons I'm giving her, it's not that I'm looking for payback. I'm saying, wow, look how much I've actually accumulated in my life. And now I'm able to put it into words that somebody else can use and fast track their education. So she's taking things that's taken me 15 years to learn, and she's learning over the course of a year.
Yeah, and the fact that whatever you see her doing just resets and reframes some of those things that kind of can also concrete those back into like, hey, you know what? That was a great, that was a great idea that you just had there. You used what I taught you. Now you just helped polish my stone, right? You helped me sharpen my knife. So I'm going to take that back into my own business and start using that again too. I think that's always something cool that happens whenever you start to give people some advice and it works. And then you get to share that back with yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Vic, you mentioned Deskside earlier. So talk to us a little bit more about Deskside. What's your role there? What does the company do? Fill us in a little bit on that particular initiative.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So Deskside is what I love to call it, the evolution of the MSP. MSP is a managed service provider. Many people know what that is these days. We're pretty much an outsourced IT department for small medium businesses. So back in 2016, I was an employee in a company that we ended up selling to a bigger company. It was an MSP. At that point, I was working for two owners, and I ended up becoming the COO of that company, running the company for the owners. The owners wanted to get out, and we sold it. When we sold it in 2016, I was a little disappointed, but at the same time, I saw this lack within the MSP community, and I saw a chance to actually evolve the model. So in 2017, we started Deskside. And Deskside is the evolution of the MSP model. We actually coin ourselves as a technology success partners, and we have three big differences that we talk around. One is that we are truly vendor agnostic. I don't care if you use Microsoft or Google or Zoho. The point is not the software or the vendor. The point is what's best for this specific company, right? And a lot of MSPs will say we're vendor agnostic. It's not true. The reality of the situation is a lot of MSPs out there are tied to their vendors because the more they sell of that one vendor, the higher the margin. I didn't set up the company that way. I don't care about points of spreads on the margins on the vendor side. I actually want the right solutions for the clients. The other big one is to have depth on the bench, to actually have the right employees in the seats. That's also something that I don't see within the MSP community. A lot of them are actually led. The owner is the best tech. I'm at probably the worst tech. I know I'm the worst tech in my company, right? I could talk the talk. I could have high level conversation. One of the things that I do very well is I talk business first, so I can have a conversation with a CEO and make the technology make sense on a business case, not talk techie and try to talk over his head to just try to sell something. But depth on the bench is really big. So everyone I hire, I actually started this company with a Silicon Valley kind of feel. For the tiny as I am, I've got the best benefits. Unlimited PTO. We have all my employees own a piece of the company. So we have all these things within the company, which really attracts a lot of talent. Because again, going back to that talent problem, you got to give them a reason to come work for you, right? And the last one is a huge one, in my opinion. At a certain point back in 2000, I think 14, 15, security, and I'm talking about cybersecurity, took a big position within the world. It's always been big, but it's becoming bigger and bigger as your digital footprint gets out there, right? And there was a divergent. There's actually two forms of companies out there. There's an MSP, managed service provider, and there's an MSSP, managed security service provider. And they actually split off. And the MSP will actually contract the MSSP a lot of times to do the security stuff. Well, I feel that model is ridiculous. because I have a hard time understanding how the person that's in charge of your infrastructure is not in charge of your security, and the person that's doing your security doesn't know anything about the infrastructure, right? And it feels wrong. The other side of it is the MSPs themselves, biggest security vulnerability that most clients have, because they're not taking care of their own security, right? SolarWinds attack, how did that happen? They went after the MSP tools, got into the MSP, and then got access to all the clients of the MSPs. Huge security problem. So Deskside is built on a security first platform, right? So everything we do is security minded. Every time I go and put a proposal in front of somebody, it's about security has a really big point of it, whether it's selling a firewall, antivirus, training and security awareness, it doesn't matter. It's all part of the same package, the same company.
That's really, that's awesome to see that all laid out and packaged up together. Cause yeah, I, being in that kind of same space, I've seen the divergence there and also the evolution of the cybersecurity as we're more and more and more connected, right? That's more and more opportunities in which the attacks on your cyber footprint are going to continue to happen. So much so that you even see like the war that's happening right now. Like, what are some of the tactics that are being utilized? It's a lot of that cyber, warfare that's going on that we don't hear a lot of, like reported in the news, just because it's not as, flashy. It's not as, the imagery isn't as prevalent as you can see. It's like a tank rolling down the street, right? But that's really the way that most people get impacted on their day-to-day lives. I mean, how many people do you know have had their identity stolen, and what mess has they've had to go through to get that reclaimed?
Well, it's even worse than that. The reason why we're not hearing about this stuff, Sammy, is because the bigger companies are the ones that hit the paper.
Yeah.
But most of the security attacks are not happening with the bigger companies. It's happening in the smaller companies, right? These companies are going out of business and 20 people know about it because they're a tiny company, right? They're your accounting company. They're your local bank. Those are the companies that get affected. And most companies that get attacked, if they don't recover within 6 months, are out of business. I mean, that's 75% of companies that get a cyber attack and they're not able to bring everything back within 6 months. They're gone. You're never going to hear from them again.
Do you have an example of like, can you share an example of like a company that maybe you're familiar with, a small company, how they got attacked and what happened to them?
Yeah, so there's lots of examples. I haven't had a client that has gotten attacked, and I'm not trying to say that we're just awesome and that doesn't happen to us. That's not what I'm saying. But it is luck of the draw. But I've heard of hospitals that have gotten attacked. I've heard of a mortgage company that had gotten attacked. Actually, there was a mortgage company in the other MSP that I owned that was on the floor above us. So we had an office in Richardson, and like any good MSP, we would go up and down the building to try to get clients within it. And obviously, you don't get all of them. But one day, I remember the mortgage company upstairs came downstairs. It's like, can you help us? Everything is down. And we're like, well, we really can't help you, because what ends up happening with an MSP, and this is where the MSSPs are actually a good thing, because they are the type of company that if you have an attack, those are the people that have the tools that come in and do project work to actually restore everything back. Companies like mine aren't like that. Companies like mine actually are proactive. We put tools in place. We put things in place. Obviously, if one of my clients does get attacked, we have things in place to bring everything back. To answer your question, Greg, there's a slew of different ways that people get attacked. It could be, let me start here. Most of the attacks are a people problem. I would say 90% of your attacks are a people problem. It's not someone brute forcing their way in or somebody actually hacking you. It's someone surfing the wrong websites, or someone clicking on a link on an email, or it's someone that picks up the phone, because hacking doesn't only happen via digital means. It could be someone on the phone, right? There's I can't remember the name of the greatest hacker, but he ended up working for the NSA at one point. But he started hacking back in the day of modems, and his biggest way to hack was to call the people and start socially engineering ways of getting into their place and talking, and what's your password, how do you get in? So that's a form of hacking. But a lot of those hacks are people problems, right? You have to educate your people, making sure they understand that an email from an outside party needs to be scrutinized. One of the simplest things that hackers will do is they will buy a domain that is very, very close to your domain and it has one letter off, right? So just one letter, they buy that domain, and all of a sudden they stand up an email server, and they have enough information about who the president is, and all of a sudden they're sending an email saying, hey, this is so-and-so, the CEO of the company, please go buy 600 gift cards and send it to this address. And people do it. There's people, I know of an attack of a company that exactly that happened. The email went to a junior accountant asking for $100 gift cards, and they had to be sent to this address. The person went out with the company credit card, bought 100 gift cards, and sent it to the address.
You want to know something crazy? I had that exact same email scam pulled on me, and I was in a company, and I got an email from my CEO, and it said, hey, Sammy, I'm busy at this thing. One of the things I forgot to do on the way here was to pick up gift cards. Can you pick them up? Go ahead and buy them on your card. I'll reimburse you. Call me or email me the codes so I can use those because we have to give away for this promotion and I don't have them. And for about 5 seconds as I read through, I was like, okay, it was a busy day, right? I read through, I was like, okay. I was like, we were a small company at the time. I was like, I was like, this might be legit. Like, it just kind of like, well, that's odd. So I just texted. I texted the CEO, and CEO was like, nah, that wasn't me. I was like, got it. So, but again, doing that due diligence and having that just slight pause, right?
Well, what's interesting is that exact situation happened at my organization. The email went to an individual that had only been with us for 2 weeks. The email came from reportedly from our CEO, which it didn't. This person actually went out and paid for the gift cards on their own credit card and sent it and fell for it for over $1,000. And so it's interesting to hear you both share the same example, and that's something that hit my organization.
It's prevalent. It happens all the time. I mean, the other big one is the ACH authorization form. So many accounting departments have procedures to change ACHs for vendors, right? So when you make a payment, you want to make sure that you're getting the payment to this vendor via this bank account. I just changed accounts for 2 of my companies, right? So we went from Iberia Bank to Chase Bank, so the accounts changed, and I'm sitting there going to all them and actually making these changes. But what they end up doing is if they can get into your company's emails, they'll sit there and watch the emails back and forth. This is why MFA is so important, right? Because if you have MFA, it's less likely that they'll be able to crack an email and actually sit there and watch emails going back and forth. When they're watching those emails back and forth, they can get key information around the vendor, the people, what your ACH authorization form looks like. Then all of a sudden, all they have to do is change the ACH authorization form, make it look like it's coming from said vendor, make that change. That gets done by a junior accountant. Next thing you know, the guy goes to make $100,000 payment, and it's going to somebody else's bank account, and God knows where. That money's gone. And the vendor's calling you 6 months later. Hey, you're getting a little behind on your receivables. What's going on? And it's, what do you mean? We paid all these. No, well, you paid them, but you didn't give them to me. You gave them to somebody else. And then you start going down the road. But that happens all the time.
I also think it's important, though, to keep in mind that sometimes cool things do happen. And so for instance, I guess this is yesterday, I got an email, believe it or not, it's from this Nigerian prince, right? And I actually, somehow he's traced my lineage to his country, and I'm going to receive, I think it's like $500,000, and all I've got to do is just send in my Social Security and my bank account. And so, I'm working with him right now to get that over. So, some pretty cool things happen, online. So just be open, for some of the cool, circumstances that might arise, right?
Yeah, you're not getting that money, man.
And tomorrow, Greg disappears, right?
Well, but let me ask you about that. So that's one of the oldest, phishing stories, that are out there. It's been going on for decades, but they're doing it because people fall for it, right? And so I'm just curious, what other type of phishing schemes are prevalent, or can you share for our viewers to hear, just to know what type of things people are doing that can slip you up?
Yeah, I mean, variations of the one you said are probably the biggest one, right? Because it'll start being a Nigerian prince, it'll be a family member. Like the ones that are really, really good are when they get into somebody's account and can start collecting information, because then they could start gearing that message to something that's a little more credible. And they're going after the older generations because they really, but there's plenty of retired people that are sending us money. The other one's the dating one is another big one. They play on people's um, people's inability to like people want love, people want money. They played on those things, right? So they'll get on a dating site and you start interacting with this person, you believe this person to be true and everything, and then they start having problems. And the biggest thing is, send me some money, I don't have enough money, but I want to come see you, and the ticket is X amount of dollars. And there's people that send these people money and they will swear that these people are real and they're in love. And so that's another phishing attack. There's ones where and I think the most dangerous ones are the ones that have less information. They don't have this big message around, right? Just to get you to click on a link. I'm working with a company that has an actual tool where I will send you a link, and it's a benign link. It's coming from me. It's actually from me. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to call you. I'm going to tell you, Sammy, I'm going to send you this email. It's going to have a link, click on it. That one link generates a report that tells me about every single vulnerability within that network, like this, right? Now imagine that being malicious, because these toolboxes are available for people to buy. So there's people out there that want to be hackers, right? And they're like, you know what? I'm tired of living on $15, $10 an hour, whatever it is. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to spend $300. I got this toolkit. And then they're going to go after the local bakery. They're going to go after the local retail store, because those are easy targets, right? And what they're doing is they're using these tools with a simple link. And all of a sudden they know the vulnerabilities that are available to them. And then it's just a matter of reading up on some website what the exploits are for those vulnerability. And all of a sudden they're getting into your bank account, they're getting into your files. Crypto locker is another big one, right? And that's probably the one that's the biggest one out there right now, in my opinion, where they will lock up all the files that are in your business, right, with an encryption key. And then they ask you to send X amount of Bitcoin to this address. And if you send them, they promise to give you the decryption key to actually unlock all your files. These guys are even getting to the point, because we used to be able to protect it by having backups, right? So if your files I don't care, we'll just restore from backup. They're getting to the point that they're actually getting to the backups. So now they're encrypting the backups.
That's scary.
Yeah. So now you don't have a restore point, right? So now what are we doing? Now we're doing on-site backup with a cloud migration and making sure that cloud has actually a deadbolt lock that you can't get into. So at the very least, you could bring it back from the cloud. But I would say 75% of the businesses don't have those things in place.
Right. I was talking to an executive that worked at a very well-known hospital chain here in Texas, and they got hit with one of those. He said it never made the media. No one knew about it, but they got all their data. And I said, well, what did they do? And they said they had to pay them everything they asked for multiple times.
Yep. And the problem with that is, because I'm not a big proponent of paying them. I don't think anybody is. But the problem is it's really a decision of whether paying them or going out of business. That's really what your choices end up being. Because if you don't have, and that's one of the things that I try to tell every day, I don't like selling on fear, but I try to tell my prospects is, listen, I almost tell them that I don't want to do business with you if we're not going to have these things in place. In fact, Deskside does not do business with people if they want just the basic MSP package. I just don't want to deal with it, because I know those people have a very high chance of getting attacked, and I'm not going to have anything there to help them, and I'm going to be liable for all that stuff, right? Because at a certain point, I'm their trusted technology partner, so I'm the one who's put it. So not having that stuff in place will get you into a point where you got to decide whether to pay them, and paying doesn't mean you're going to get your stuff back. They promise to get your stuff back, but and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I've known people that have paid the ransom as well.
And when you have individuals, there's a lot of people that watch this show and they may be really freaked out right now. So what are some of those actionable things that people can do to keep their digital presence safe? One thing that I typically I'll post this on Facebook. But I've kind of changed my tactic a little bit. I always tell, just remind people, like when it pops in my mind, you know what, today's a good day to change your password. Just go and change your password. But a friend of mine, actually, he replaces his air filters in his furnaces at daylight savings time switches. So I was like, well, why don't I just do that and change my password every time the time changes, change my password. And that might not be frequent enough, but that's what I've taken on so far. But what are some tips like that that people could take?
Yeah, I've got a slew of them. So there's two sides to this coin. One's personal and one's business, right? And they are two different times. So let's talk personal because that's a little easier in my opinion,
Sure.
because especially these days, everything's in the cloud. For the most part, people don't really have file servers and things at home, or if they lose their laptop, it's not the end of the world for most personal users. So one of the things I like telling people is don't store your passwords on your browsers. Bad idea. There is good software out there. I use Keeper Security for myself because changing a password is great, but what are you changing your password to? Because there's something called a brute force attack that will actually sit there and just beat the crap out of your password. And if your password's not complicated enough and long enough, they will crack that password. So then becomes the other problem is like, well, how complicated and how long can I make that password and still remember it? Right? It's like,
Right.
and what am I going to do? Most people, what they do is you get their password and it's like 2022, right? The year, or it's last year, 2021. And that's what they end up doing, or they put another digit in front of it. So I use something like Keeper because I've gotten to the point where I took all my passwords and I have no less, I don't remember, I haven't looked at my vault lately, but I think I was about 500 credentials that I have, right? Between banking and Netflix and just think about all those things. I have gotten to the point, and trust me, I'm in IT, I'm in technology. I just got there probably 3 years ago. So I can imagine what people that aren't in this, but I've gotten to the point that every single one of my credentials is unique, 20 character longs and complicated, and I don't know one password. I don't know any of my passwords. So, and the reason I don't know is because I have this vault thing that'll actually populate the passwords for me when it's appropriate. And there's one really complicated password. Plus, I use a varied different types of security keys. So you guys have probably seen something like that, right? But I've gotten to the point, this is the next generation of that. This is a hardware security key. I have to actually plug this into the machine. And that's my dual factor. So not only do I have a password, but now if I don't have this key with me, I'm not getting in. And there's different ways. I mean, that's really on the bleeding edge. Like, someone like me would be using it, especially since we promote password and security within the organization. But have the MFA turned on, have that complexity in there, get a good LastPass is another one of those password management things. Don't keep them in the browser because the browsers, what ends up happening is if they get into your computer, the browser will automatically just keep adding those passwords into those things. So anybody who gets access to your computer has access to everything. Now you talk about your banking and everything else. So that's on the personal side. On the business side, you take that to the next level. Okay, because now you're talking about that personal protection. That's the same exact thing. I have a business version of the Keeper that we have shared credentials and all my employees have access to only what they need access to. We use Active Directory, Office 365 to actually do all the AD integrated with security groups so that this way people have to be put into a security group in order to have access to a whole bunch of different things. I mean, my phone system, for instance, if you're not in a specific security group, you don't have access to my phone system, right? So those kind of things are a little more complicated. They're more geared to the business. And then it's the basic stuff. Like you'd be amazed how many businesses don't have the basics covered. DNS, I love talking about DNS. And most people don't even know what that is unless you're in the tech field. But there is a URL, right? www.google.com is a URL. Most businesses have a URL. Behind that URL is a DNS server. There is things that you can do to protect that zone file so that emails from rogue mail servers can't get delivered, right? Most people don't have that in place, and that's basic security. And I'm talking about people that have MSPs taking care of them, don't have this stuff in place, right? So then you start layering it, because I always say security is a layered approach. So you start with your DNS file, then you have your firewall on site to make sure that only certain things are allowed to pass through and get onto your network. Then you start talking about making sure that every single one of the computers is up to date, right? That's something else. Most MSPs, you know what they're doing? Security updates automatic. Well, are they happening? Like, that's great that Windows has that feature. I'm not, but there is times where that stuff doesn't get installed, right? Is anybody checking that? Most MSPs, it doesn't happen. And then when you start protecting, make sure your applications are up to date. And then you could start layering other stuff. There's spam filters to make sure that the emails that are coming in are getting blocked if they have a certain things. There's antivirus. There's new age antivirus these days, right? There's next gen antivirus actually has that definition driven search and block kind of feature. And now we're getting into the world of EDR, which is early detection and recovery. So it actually, if it detects some sort of virus type thing, even though it doesn't have a definition for it, it shuts down that machine. It does not let it get access to the rest of the network. So that's the next layer of and most people have that in there. Now we're starting to talk about the next evolution of that, which enterprises have already done, is what's called a zero trust environment, where you actually put software on these machines to learn the basic activities of that specific user, and everything else gets blocked. And when something new happens that is illegitimate, the first thing is, no, you're not doing it. And then it has to be sent for approval in order for that thing to happen. So that's really where we're playing on these days, is that zero trust kind of architecture.
So I'm making a note now. Change all my passwords from "this is my password" to different things. Okay. All right, so
things, right? That's the password. Different things.
To different things. This is. I'm gonna change it to "this is not my password."
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3! Exclamation mark, number sign.
Greg, when I made the change to that thing, it took me literally 6 weeks before I was done.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a commitment, but honestly, I put myself out there a lot, so my digital footprint is really big. Like, I'm putting a big target on my back because I preach this stuff, right? So I had to do it. I forced everybody within my organization to do it because I do want Deskside to be 100%, or I shouldn't say 100% because you're never 100%, but as secure we possibly can be. But it does take commitment. It does take time.
Yeah, it's also, it goes back to that little bit of a peace of mind, and I kind of want to flip into the next kind of category of stuff that we want to talk to you about. But we've talked about mental health, we've talked about security, but all those two together can combine for some nice comforting, relaxing days, right? If you know you're taken care of. But one of the big things too that you're really big on is health and wellness and nutrition. And so you've got your mind right, you're feeling secure. How does Vic go about maintaining his health, and what is your relationship with health and wellness within your life?
Well, I started my life being completely on the other side of the pendulum, right? So I was 350 pounds, completely obese and out of shape, and I was in a bad place. And that was when I was about 22, 23 years old. So, for a majority of my life, I was obese. I was in a bad place. When you're there, you don't really realize you're there. What made me realize that I was in a bad place is having kids. When Alexis was born and, she started to crawl, I started realizing that I could not keep up with her. So I was having a hard time, and I started looking within, and I was like, wow, this is not good. I'm in a terrible place right now. And unfortunately, because I had a psychological problem, because obesity is not a physical problem, it's a psychological problem, right? You are addicted to food, right? Just like a drug addict is addicted to drugs, you're addicted to food. You don't think straight. So I wish I would have known all the things I know now in order to make better decisions, but I ended up making some terrible decisions. I ended up going and getting gastric bypass. Which at the time I thought that if I didn't do it, I was going to die. And it was something that's necessary. And it was something that was being pushed in that time. And it worked. I lost a lot of weight very fast. I went from 350 pounds to about 225, 230 in the course of 6 to 7 months, something like that, which anybody will tell you it's a terrible idea. That weight shift is just detrimental to your body. It does a lot of bad stuff. And then I have all the other complications that come with that gastric bypass. But that forced me into a position where I did all this and I was still kind of overweight and I was still not feeling well, right? So I was like, wait a second, but the doctors told me everything was going to be great after this, right? Wasn't the case. What I truly found is what I always knew. Exercise and nutrition is the only key to better body, better health, better mind, right? And those all three things are all connected, because sugar, sugar will make you obese, but it messes with your brain way worse and way more than the obesity does, right? That sugar actually does mess with you. I mean, we could talk about your blood sugar levels rising and crashing and what it actually does to you mentally, right? So I started picking up books, because that's what Victor does. When he doesn't understand something, he starts reading about it. And I started down this path of training. I started learning about hormones. I started learning about different blood levels and what each of the vitamins do. And then little by little, I started getting really fit, right? So I had gastric bypass, but honestly, man, that gastric bypass was a fast way to lose a lot of weight. I don't recommend it to anybody. Anybody that ever asks me, should I do it? I tell them no. Go see a shrink, go see a psychologist, talk through that, because there's other ways to fix that. And honestly, you're not fixing it with this surgery. You're just gonna do damage to yourself in other ways, right? So then I started learning. The best book that I got when it comes to nutrition was a book called Deep Nutrition by Dr. Catherine Hallahan. She is awesome. She put together this fantastic book, and there's certain things in there that as I was reading, I was getting angry about the American, like this country, as great as it is. And trust me, I bleed red, white, and blue. I am 100%, but food wise, nutrition wise, this country's terrible, terrible. So, and I was getting angry because there's a lot of stuff that, believe it or not, and I mean, you could find this stuff on the internet. There's things that we have readily available that we're giving our kids in this country. You go to 7-Eleven, you can pick it up, are actually illegal in our European. I'm not talking about third world. I'm talking about Europe and Switzerland that are actually illegal. You cannot buy them. They won't let them in the country because of some cancer-causing drugs that they have in those foods. So I started learning, and the biggest thing, if everybody listening at this podcast learns nothing else, I know the cybersecurity stuff was cool, I would say there's two things. Get rid of vegetable oil from your life, right? If you do nothing else, there is way healthier oil. Vegetable oils are doing nothing but releasing free radicals within your body, and just literally the reason why everything that you eat that is fried in vegetable oil is so crispy is because that's what it's doing to the inside of your body. It's actually oxidizing the inside of your body. It does the same kind of thing. It's not the heat, it's the oil that's actually doing that. The heat's cooking it, but the oil actually does that oxidization. So vegetable oil, terrible. There's plenty of healthier oils out there. And then sugar, limit sugar. Sugar is so bad. And I'm talking about everything from rice to bread, not just cakes and ice cream. And I'm not saying you don't have it. You know, one of the things that I talk about in my book is the 80% rule. And you could apply that rule to anything in your life. If you do the majority of everything in your life to 80% of what the rule of law is, you're probably doing okay, right? So I'm not saying that you get rid of vegetable oil 100%. It's impossible. That means you'll never be able to go to another restaurant, because honestly, I don't know, maybe there's 99.9% of restaurants are using vegetable oil in one form or the other. So that means if you cut that out, truly cut it out, you could never go to a restaurant, right? Sugar's the same way. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have a slice of birthday cake. That's ridiculous. But if you look at the quantity that we're having in this country, I mean, it's disgusting when you start looking. We could literally be drinking vegetable oil on a regular basis with the quantity that we're ingesting with the foods that we're eating. Sugar, forget about it. I mean, the amount of soda and the amount of stuff that's out there, it is so easy to get 100, 200 grams of sugar into your daily diet, and you don't even realize it, right?
Mhm.
But when I put 200 grams of sugar in front of you in its raw form, you're saying, I'm not eating that. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. So those are the two different things. Then fitness is the other side of it, because nutrition is great, what you're putting into your body, the building blocks, but then you got to get that blood flowing, right? You got to get those building blocks moving within the rest of your body. You got to get those lungs pumping. You know, the lungs and the heart are two organs that are actually get better with use, right? Just similar to the other muscles. So you want to use them on a regular basis, and you don't have to do a lot, you know, and most proponents is 30 minutes, right? If you could do 30 minutes 3 to 4 times a week, you're doing good. You're doing okay. You know, get on a Peloton for 30 minutes 3 times a week, and you'll see a huge difference, even if it's just a walk. When I started my journey from 350 pounds all the way down to, I got as low as 175 at one point, but my exercise was literally standing up, taking a walk for 5 minutes, coming back and sitting down. And next day would be 15-minute walk. And the next day would be a 20-minute walk. And the next day would be 25 minutes. Eventually it was a bike ride, or eventually it was something else. I was always just doing a little more, a little more, a little more. Then you get to the point that you're in a good place. The other thing I will say about this is there's ebbs and flows. There's been times where I've been super fit, ready to go on stage as a bodybuilder. And there's moments like now in my life, which I'm really struggling with that part of my life, right? The nutrition I'm doing okay with, the fitness, not so much. It's okay. As long as you have it up here, that's not a good thing and you got to get back to it, then it's okay. If you forget about it and it's gone from your life, that's when it's not okay.
Yeah. You know, Vic, for me, from a young person, fitness and exercise was always a big part of my life because I was an athlete and I played sports. As I started getting older, my why, in terms of what was driving my desire to exercise, was based in vanity, right? I wanted to look good and I wanted to continue to be able to excel and compete at sports. Well, as I got older, and I actually credit Sammy a lot with this, my diet for the majority of my life was like the typical American sixth grader on up into my 20s and 30s, where I was eating fast food, pizza, chicken strips, just all the bad junk that we know. Everything that you just talked about was my diet. Well, George W. Bush, and I'll never forget this, he actually he had to have a heart procedure done. And I remember being shocked because I thought he was really young to have a heart procedure. And they talked about one of the reasons, I guess, why that happened was just based on like blockage and different stuff. And here I thought he was this kind of, you know, somewhat young, you know, he was probably in his mid to late 50s, mid 60s maybe, but I thought he was young to be having heart issues. And he was an active mountain bike rider. And that forced me to start looking at like, what's going on there? And I started getting this little seed in my head of like diet and nutrition. And so like you, I started studying, I started reading. Sammy and I started having a lot of conversations because Sammy was really honed in on nutrition at that time. And I just dove into it. And over the course of probably 3 years, I did a 180 in terms of my nutrition. And my why now has gone from vanity metrics to like, I'm just such a better person when my nutrition and my fitness is on point. I think better, I feel better, I've got more energy, I'm able to do more things. And I start looking at a longevity standpoint. I'm 44 now. I have goals of things that I want to be doing when I'm 55, 65, 75, 85, that if I continue to really hone in on my nutrition and my fitness well-being, I plan on being able to do those things, God willing. But if I revert back to the lifestyle that I used to live, I'm going to be no different than any other typical 85-year-old that's stuck on a couch unable to move. And that is not what I want my life to be about. So my why has changed, and I've gone so far of like, I've got lists of like, these are the foods that the 80-20 you talked about. These are my 80-20, right? These are the foods that I'm going to consume. These are the foods that I'm going to avoid. And it's a lot of sacrifice, but in my world, for me personally, it's totally worth it. But Sammy, I know you've got a lot to share on this topic, so I'd love to have you chime in.
Yeah, I had a very similar story to you, Vic. I don't know if you ever knew it, but our audience does know it. I found myself one morning waking up. It was probably my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, about early 30s, that I stepped on the scale and the scale stopped. Like it was one with the road, it stopped because it hit the peg, and it hit the peg at 299.
Yep.
And I thought, what? And I remember thinking that it looked like that little peg was going to break and it was going to keep going. I was probably sitting close to about 315. But I mean, I'm sitting right now at 185. And the way that I did that was almost entirely in those early stages of just nutrition, just understanding what I was eating, understanding what I was doing. I had some help with some different diets and different exercises, that kind of stuff. The ketogenic diet did a lot for me. I did it very low carb, that kind of stuff. And that kind of boosted me into where I am now. And I'm a big proponent of what you said, just getting rid of the sugar, understanding like all those different types of oils and all that kind of stuff that, researching and understanding. But the biggest component too, that I think a lot of people need to realize in their weight loss journey or their health journey, I should say, is that you have the entire control is up to you on what you put inside your mouth. So know that you have the power over whatever that is, and that you can have that choice to make those healthy choices. I think that's one of the biggest switches in my mind. And my why was because of my kids. I did not want to be the dad that couldn't get on the floor and roll around and then get up and go and play or chase after my kids and be so out of breath. So I've been there too. I know how it is. And right now my focus is on lifting weights and gaining lean muscle mass and grip strength. Because as you get older, you start to lose grip strength. And that's one of the leading indicators of falls in people is they can't hold themselves up. So like, you know what, that's something I want to pay attention to. So yeah, I love that you brought up that your story. For one, thank you for sharing that. And then number two, being able to share a little bit of the tactics and things that you did to help yourself, because I think people need that, right? They just need those little nuggets of wisdom, and then they can start to build upon that as they go along their journey as well.
Well, I think the other thing too is you've got to be intentional about it, and like we've both mentioned, all three of us have mentioned, define your why. But ultimately, the book, The Pursuit of Growth, that Sammy and I wrote, it's ultimately, you can sum it up to it's the lifelong pursuit to becoming the best version of yourself. And you've got to have that health and wellness component there to really be able to achieve that. But I want to go back to something that Vic said, that we're all going to have seasons and ups and downs in our lives in all these major areas. And the pursuit of growth isn't just one of these where it's just always going up. It's one of these, right? And so when you have those ebbs and flows, it's like you said, Vic, you have the mindset to understand, hey, I've got an opportunity. And so I'm going to work to get to the point to where I want to go. I'm going to put my plan together. I'm going to pursue that growth. I say all that and I bring our book up because I want to transition, Vic, to your book. Mm-hmm. So tell us what you're working on. I know a little bit about it, but I'm very excited to hear more. And I'm more excited to actually get a copy and check it out when it's ready.
Yeah, it's actually draft, and I've actually been there with you on your journey to writing your book. So I'm at the point where I finished the first draft. So all 13 chapters are done.
Nice.
I'm at 25,000 words. Now I got to get to 50,000 words, right? So I got to add the stories, and then eventually I'll get help to do the editing. So my book is about that little voice that's in your head, and we all have it. I've asked the same question of so many people. And they all tell me, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But there's another version of yourself deep within your head, right? Inside. And sometimes that person comes out, right? And after that person comes out in a meeting or at a family event or whatever, you're in the car and you're thinking to yourself, wow, who the heck was that, right? It just, everything worked out perfect. What you said, the clarity behind it. And I coined that person as your true potential. Everyone has their version of their true potential within them. And the reality of it is that I've learned that it's not that we don't have it. There's no difference between me and Elon Musk, or me and Joe Biden, or Trump, or whoever, right? They're all grade A, but the only difference between me and them is they've had access to their true potential, and they could bring that person out at will, as compared to me, that I'm struggling with that, right? I'm not able to bring that out as easily. And I started asking myself, well, why is that, right? And you know that I'm an avid reader. Before Audible, I used to read about a book a month. And now with Audible, I've gotten to as many as 4 books a month. I'm still hovering between that 2 books a month. But if you look at it over the course of my life, I've read over 300 books in different categories. And it's not in one category. It's in nutrition, it's in fitness, it's in business. And in each one of those, I've learned a little something, right? And then I started putting it together. It's like, wow, these books are really awesome in their specific niche. The Pursuit of Growth does a really good job of taking what I think I'm doing with accessing your true potential, taking a little bit of the lessons, SMART goals, talking about the 13 different areas. Like you start talking about all these different things and all the things you can put in your life, but that's from different things that you've learned over a course of your life. Mm-hmm. So what I started looking at is, all right, if I want access to true potential, what does someone have to do? Someone that doesn't do it naturally, right? And Elon Musk, that doesn't naturally, he just does all these things on a regular basis. And I put it into 4 different categories: health, clarity, peace, and power. Right. So what are the things you have to do to affect your health pillar? And that's nutrition and fitness. What do you have to do to affect your clarity? Clarity being clarity of mind. And I put that into a pillar called effective routines. Having effective routines will help you be clear. Then when it comes to peace, peace is a part about it's emotional peace, right? And there's 2 pillars in that one. It's all about spiritual health and about family and relationships. Those 2 pillars will bring you peace into your life. And the last one is power, right? Because I wanted to add like that one time when you can do stuff, and that's all around continuous learning. So those 6 pillars affect 4 different areas of your life. And if you I actually say they're wheels, and you have to get them spinning. And the faster you get those wheels spinning, the closer you will have access to that true potential at will.
I love it. You're touching on so many things. I know Greg is lighting up about this with joy as well, because you've nailed it as well, right? We've all got the same the same types of information that we've accessed from time to time that we've been able to utilize. And I love that you named it the true potential as well, because we see it in each other. Like when a joke lands, like when everyone laughs, you're like, huh, I'm pretty funny. Like it feels good, right? Yeah. Or, at times when you have the right answer, or those times in which you help someone and you serve someone as well. So I'm really looking forward to your book and the way you've outlined that, because I think we need more of that. When the Pursuit of Growth, what we wanted to do was write an actionable roadmap for people to be able to take that journey, right? Start that pursuing growth. And I think this is another key component of that too.
Yeah, and actually, I do highlight certain pieces of the Pursuit of Growth within my book, because you guys do make a good case about tactical things that you could do on a daily basis, right? Which starts touching on effective routines, because effective routines, and in the book, I start talking about effective routines, like put these things in your life. The more of these things you put in your life, the faster you're going to get that clarity wheel spinning. The faster that wheel spins, that portion of your true self is going to start coming out. And Craig, you said it yourself too about nutrition and fitness and you feeling better. Well, that's because you're getting that health wheel spinning. Yeah. When you get that health wheel spinning, you're going to have access to things that you don't normally have access to. But yeah, it has all the same thing. I took a lot of lessons, because in reading your first manuscript and then the resulting book, I learned a lot in that process myself when you guys were writing your book. And in that process, I was like, okay, I think I have something here. And I actually do want to put some tactical things behind that people can take, so they don't have to go and read all 500 books that I've read in my life. They can just take the pieces that I've learned and actually put them into use and actually get something out of it.
Yeah. And I like how you really are honing in on the habits aspect of things. Yeah. And so like in our book, we have an 11-step plan that it's not necessary for every goal. You can literally take one of the steps. You can literally write a goal down, and that's all you need to accomplish it. But we have a 11-step process for those big audacious goals that if you follow consistently, you're going to achieve that goal, or you're going to see where you're hung up to be able to continue to move forward, figure that piece out, and keep going. But the key that I think that we have an opportunity to go back and actually emphasize more, and if we go back and revisit the book and make another edition, is the key about repetition. And really what that is, it's habits, right? Yeah. And so how really to make things habitual, that is such a key. When you can take things and make them to where they're simple and easy in your life, that's when you really start. And I like your analogy of the circle. When you get it going, it's hard for that motion to stop. And so I'm really excited to see how you put all this together. I think this is going to be a really cool book, which I'm going to ask a question that when we were prepping for this show that Sammy actually came up with. I'm going to steal Sammy's question, but we know this. Writing a book is hard. Yeah. What's your motivation for torturing yourself like this? Like what to tell us what's your why behind this book?
I don't know. I can't explain it. To me, it's like, when there's certain times in your life when the Lord just like works through you, and you kind of feel that. And I think that that's what it is, because it's something I have to do. And I feel that if I don't do it, I don't feel I can't not do it. Let's just put it that way. So it's torture. You're absolutely right. And I'm drawing on all the help I can get to just get it done. Like getting to this thing has taken me, it's been like 14 or 15 months since I started writing stuff down, like actually making the outline and start working through it. And I would say I'm probably 50% of the way done, because there's a lot of work. And I got 4 businesses. I got a full-time job that I have to do. So this is getting done in like nights and weekends, little by little. So it's definitely a passion project. I definitely feel that it's something I have to do, but I don't know why. The only thing I could come up with is my first attempt at writing a book was all around leaving something for my kids. I wanted to leave them something to kind of fast track their ability to learn, right? And you do that as a parent, you do that naturally. You try to fast track them, but they don't listen half the time, right? Especially when they get to teenagers, forget about it. They don't listen. So if you could actually put something in their hands that when they're not too good to listen, they're sitting there reading it. And that's what this book is. It's like, I wanted to give something more. Then it just started to expand. It's like, well, if I could leave something for my kids, I could leave something for the whole world. And if even I can help, 100 people, it's worth it. It's worth every single minute that I'm putting in there, because I've helped 100 people. So it's a service thing. It's a thing to leave it to my kids. It's also, I feel like I've accumulated all this information, and I just want to put it out there. And what better format than a book?
Yeah, and I'll echo that. So one of the greatest joys in my life has been the feedback that people have given Sammy and I about our book. And when they've shared testimonials about how this part really resonated with me, and because of that, I've done this. I've had people reach out and say, hey, I just bought your book and I'm sending it to my sister, who I think really needs this. And another cool thing, and actually I think it's coming out this week, but a person that Sammy and I both know read the book, reached out to us about a year later and said, hey, you inspired me to write my own children's book. Wow. And it's coming out now. And it helped me get through a point in my career where I literally was depressed and going through a ton of anxiety. And the book was one of many things that helped her to kind of redirect where her perspective was, and gave her a game plan on, hey, this is how I can achieve this goal. And she followed the process, and now she's putting out her own book. So when you start getting those stories from people, man, like it makes all that hard work be like, it's time to do it again, because it's just such a cool feeling.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's probably the why, right? It's just how many people can we actually help?
Yeah, and you hear the story a lot about people are like, man, if we could just help one person, and that's great, but Sammy and I both, like, we realize there's a need from so many people.
Yeah.
And for us, it's not thinking, hey, we're going to come and solve your problem, but let's build a community of people of like-minded thoughts and processes and habits and goals that we can collectively start helping each other. And so we feel like this is just a piece. What you're doing right now is exactly the same type of thing. So we want to help you when you're ready. We're going to promote the hell out of what you're doing. And let's get more people just looking at life through this lens, because these are the type of things that are going to help us to start going in the right direction. Again, I've said this a couple times this show, but we need to be doing things counterculturally, because right now our culture is not going in the right direction. We need to get more people talking about, hey, these are some things that we can do, especially this younger generation that's coming up behind us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And the one thing that I will tell you, just that really resonates with me, is that I cannot, to this day, as a 46-year-old man, I cannot believe how big the world is, and how many people are suffering the same exact thing. There's so much information out there, but you're right. We're just like headed in the completely wrong direction. And if we could just help a subset of people and just help them get over these little things, because for us, they're little, for them, it's huge problems within their lives, right? But there's easy solutions for a lot of this stuff. We can get them past that stuff, then maybe they can start opening up their mind to other things, right? Then we could start because I really do feel this country is going in the wrong direction. And I think with things like this, we could start getting people with common goals and common mindsets, and we could start leaning towards a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sammy, this is the part of the show where we start kind of the fourth quarter winding down. And so we've got two questions for you, Vic, that we ask every single guest that comes on the show. So, Sammy, I'll hop in with the first one, let you go for the second one.
Sure.
So first and foremost, you've already answered this question many times over. And so I'm going to ask you maybe to share something new that we haven't discussed already. But the question is, what first enters your mind when we ask you, what's an actionable tip, method, routine, or lesson that has made a major impact in your life?
Sleep. So that's one we haven't really talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But getting your sleep right is so important. I cannot emphasize how important getting good sleep is. How you get that, that's a really complicated. We could have a show just around sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But getting your sleep right is another thing that's really, really big. Actually getting what you as a person require. Everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
What you as a person require, actually making sure that you're sleeping soundly throughout the night, getting into that REM cycle. I actually monitor my sleep every night. I have an app on my phone that just listens to my breathing. So that I make sure that I'm getting my hours, not only in bed, because there's a difference between being in bed and being asleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the things you can do, like, stay away from alcohol before going to bed. That'll kill your sleep for sure. Make sure that you're getting to bed at a reasonable times to where you have a wind out session and you can actually get to bed when it's good and get enough sleep. I don't get up with an alarm, because I'm doing the right thing. So my internal clock, and I used to be an alarm person, but now I get up probably 30 seconds before that thing goes off. I don't need it. And that happens on the weekend and whatever. And I wake up at a different time on the weekend. I usually get up around 7 o'clock on the weekend as compared to 6 o'clock on the weekdays. My body knows and it wakes up. So sleep, can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that fact. And that is something that's really important that I think most people don't realize the impact of sleep in their day until they don't have it. Because then all you can think about is how tired you are, how sleepy you are. So just imagine if you focus on that just a little bit, how great that impact can be on yourself.
Yeah, and it's important to note that when you're not getting good sleep, the results of that are pretty prevalent, pretty fast.
Yeah.
However, getting that back takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So every time you lose good sleep, you start feeling the effect, but getting back to a place where you're in a good place, that you've gotten the necessary rest and everything, that takes time, that takes effort.
Well, there's several studies that I've read recently. I'm actually working on a blog about sleep. Interesting you bring that up. And there's several studies right now that talk about literally maybe the biggest indicator or the biggest factor in terms of people not live to their full lifespan is because of poor quality of sleep throughout their life. That's how important it is.
Yeah, and I believe it. I mean, I've witnessed it in my past. Like, I mean, talking about anxiety and depression, that also affects your sleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you're sitting there just thinking, and you can't get to sleep, your next day is going to be crap. I mean,
Yep.
that's the reality of it.
All right. So our second question that we like to ask all of our guests is a little bit of a story here. So Greg and I are going to create a time capsule for the pursuit of growth. And we are going to bury this and dig it up 10 years later. We want you to take part. We want you to take a little piece of paper out and write on that, write a note to yourself. So what advice would you give your future self 10 years from now?
My future self, that's a twist, because you're usually trying to give your past self.
Yep.
Wow. Huh.
So when yeah, exactly. When you dig up that time capsule with us in 10 years, what will your note tell yourself?
I hope you did all the things you're thinking about doing. I don't know. That's a really deep question. I would have to really think it through. I mean, I would hope that it made the progress that I've made. You know what I would tell myself? I know what I would put in there. I would put in there, it's okay. I'm gonna put myself in there that no matter what you've accomplished, it's
That's
okay.
good.
Yeah, that's probably what I put in there.
I love
Man,
it.
that's really good. Well, Sammy, this is the hardest part of the show, man.
This is
This is going to be a tough one. So, Vic, this is where we had mentioned to you before we came on to record the podcast, as we've been writing down notes of this conversation, Sammy and I are going to take each 3 takeaways from this conversation that made a big impact on us. Now, I'm historically known for cheating, and I'll say that I'm gonna do 3, and then I can't because I've got a full page of stuff, so I end up doing like 6. But Sammy made me promise I've got to keep it to 3, so I'm gonna do my best to go for 3 tonight. Sammy, I'm gonna be a gentleman and let you start out and go first, so we'll ping pong back and forth.
All right, that's cool. That works for me. I am going to pull one out right off the bat. And Greg, this kind of pairs with you, what you asked Vic. I think the to-be list is something that everybody needs to take part in. I loved your answers. Be happy and be free. I actually just wrote a note that I'm going to personally I'm going to create my to-be list. I made it rhyme. I'm going to pick 3 for me. So that's what I'm going to do. I hope everyone else can do that too.
My first takeaway, I'm going to go directly to your book. I'm really excited about that, and I love how you nailed it down to health, clarity, peace, and power. And I like how you describe the importance of those 4 and what really matters. And, you know, in the piece, it really resonated with me because this is something that I'm doing a lot of intentional work with right now, is my faith in God and my relationships. And you hit the nail on the head, Vic. Those 2 categories have more to do with a person's overall well-being and their joy in life than any other combination of any other items you can come up with. The quality of your relationships and the quality of your faith. So I'm really excited to see what you put together in this book. Let us know when it's ready because we want to help you promote this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going as fast as I can.
Well, I think that actually partners very well with what Greg just said. But reading is key. There was a long time, we talk about this in the book, we've talked about this on the show, is that both Greg and I had shunned reading for a very long time. We were done with books. Like, we knew everything we needed to know. There was an old quote that someone used to say on the radio that I started to adopt, and shame on me for saying it, but my favorite book was Magazine there for a while. So I think that you have shown that reading is key. And I wanted to highlight the 3 books that you mentioned tonight was Miracle Morning, Predictable Success, and Deep Nutrition. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go pick those up because those sound interesting. I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, they're definitely good books.
I'm just going to say the whole conversation that we had on cybersecurity. And I joked about my password this is my password for everything. I have a major opportunity to really take control of my personal security. And then it's also made me think about our organization. And I need to go back to the charity that I work with and have some more in-depth conversations about what are we doing to ensure that we're protecting what we have in our database. We have a lot of information with a lot of people that can be something that if that were to become an issue could cause major problems not only for us but for a lot of other people. And so we've all heard how important it is, but hearing you give those examples and just talk through it really just sparked a light bulb in my mind that, hey, I've got some work to do. So that's a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, and most of us do. So it's not only you.
Yeah.
I love that. The last one that I had, I was going between about 4 different points. I've got a whole page full of notes here, but it was something that you mentioned when we were talking about your weight loss journey, that you said do a little more. And do a little more every day, especially when you're starting out. And I think that's something that people can realize. And you just hit the nail on the head, right? It said most people do, right? But you could start. And I think just doing that little bit more every single day is a key tactic and takeaway that people can utilize in all aspects of their life.
Absolutely.
And again, I like what Sammy said. I've got literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other things starred as we've been having this conversations as potential top 3 takeaways. But I'm going to choose mentorship. Mm-hmm. And so I love the conversation about how you said, and I'll summarize it, is who are the people you can turn to for help? But equally as important, who are the people that you can look to give help? Yeah. I love that. And I think that's something that each and every one of us that is a part of this podcast, that's something that we should start asking ourselves. Where are the areas in life that we can use some help? And who are the people in our lives that we can be prepared and ready, willing to be able to serve? So those are my 3 takeaways.
Yeah, those are all good. And do that without expecting anything in return. That's when it's really cool.
Absolutely. Yep. Bingo. Well, Sammy, I guess this is the point where we're going to let Vic do some shameless plugs, man. So we've had an amazing conversation. I know people that have listened to this episode are going to want to know, okay, where can I connect with Vic? Can I follow him online? How can I see more about Deskside? Hey, how can people reach you? How can people follow what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm all over on all the social media channels. Personally, the biggest one for me is I'm all over LinkedIn. And you could just find me with my real name, Vittorio Calabrese. So that's where I'm most active. Deskside is on all the social media channels as well. But again, LinkedIn is probably our biggest social media platform. Deskside.com is our company side. The other one is my wife's company, Pretty Teepees. She does children's events, spa parties and sleepovers. That company's really cool. We have a lot of fun with them. We just bringing joy to those kids is something that, I'm outside of it, but she does an awesome job. And it's just, we have video of a girl literally screaming because she was surprised at what her mom had put together for her. And we were able to put that together. So those are the other sides. Pretty Teepees is all over all the social media platforms as well, local to McKinney. So that's it. Those are where you go. prettyteepees.com, deskside.com, and then LinkedIn is the biggest place to find me.
That's awesome. Well, the shameless self-promotion is also one of my things that I love to allow other people to do. So I hope that the audience can connect on either of those or any of those channels and then really get some great information from you. Because as you can see, I think we're just scratching the surface on so many topics we could talk about. But again, hopefully we can do a round 2 here pretty soon once you kind of get that next phase of the book. Once the life frees you up just a little bit, we'll lock you back down for another conversation, and maybe we'll dive into a little bit more about sleep. And we'll dive a little bit more about your book a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys are getting the manuscript because you're going to be one of the ones that are going to read it first.
Can't wait.
Nice.
Can't wait.
Fantastic. Well, you can find more about the Pursuit of Growth online at our website, which is www.livetpg.com, where you can purchase our book for yourself, purchase for a friend or family member. You can also subscribe and get our 1 Minute Matters blog that goes out weekly. You'll also get weekly emails with this podcast. Also, the podcast is hosted on our website as well as YouTube, plus all your favorite podcast platforms. So go check out our website, connect with Sammy and I online. We're on all the social media platforms under Live TPG or The Pursuit of Growth. You can find us there. But just once again, Vic, man, this was a fun conversation. I love doing this show so much because I leave motivated, fired up. But more importantly, motivation comes in spurts and then it goes away. But I'm walking away with actionable tips and things that I can do to, again, help me to become the best version of myself. So thank you for your wisdom and your insight. And again, man, I'm just very excited about what you're doing, and I can't wait to read the book.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Awesome.
All right. Well, with that, guys, live TPG.